Today on the Coach Why podcast, we have a very special guest. Soccer is in his blood. He spent time playing soccer at the next level, competing at Wingate University. After graduation, he spent time coaching at USC Sumter, USC Salkehatchie. He also made his way onto the coaching staff of San Diego State University. After moving from LA, he moved back to North Carolina, and he was an assistant at Duke University. And all while this is happening, in 2017, he became part of USA Men's National Soccer Team organization as a scout. Today, we welcome Coach Giovanni Vlahos to the Coach Why podcast. With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coaches Why podcast.
That was my Coaches Why.
Welcome back to the Coach Why podcast. We have a very special guest. He is our first soccer coach coming onto our show, coming all the way from Cape Fear Community College out of North Carolina, Coach Giovanni Vlahos. Coach, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. I really appreciate you jumping on here today. I'm excited. I think we're going to hopefully we can get some gems in this thing, and make sure you guys pay attention and listen to the whole episode today, because I know we're going to have some good stuff come from this. So, Coach, kind of how we get started here is before we jump into like the coaching journey, talk about, how you got to where you're at and all the fun stuff about coaching. I'll pass it over to you and let you kind of take over and let myself know and everybody else know kind of a little bit about you, where you grew up, and kind of when you gotten started with the sport of soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in Athens, Greece. My father's Greek, my mother's Italian. So soccer's all we really knew. At a young age, we grew up in Italy, and then coming to stateside. It was, back in those earlier days, there wasn't much knowledge on soccer as it is today with the introduction, obviously, of technology and the influx of so many European games and everything being brought over to the U.S. So that's been great for us, but we just grew up around it. I mean, it's in our blood. Outside of church family and soccer, that's all there is. So that's how I got started, just at a young age. My father, my brother and I both played the sport. And then we came to U.S., did the classic route of high school and college soccer. And then life takes over and you start to try to figure out what your journey is. I made my way from North Carolina. I went to school in North Carolina. And then, my journey took me out to Los Angeles, California. So I spent the last 2 decades in LA and in San Diego. And out there, while I was just looking for a real job, soccer fell into my life again. It was, once you start getting at a certain age, you think that you can't play anymore and you're done with the sport. Your body just stops working. So I was looking for a real job, and a guy that I was working with was actually a JV football coach at a local high school in Southern California. And he approached me and he said, "Hey, they're looking for a JV soccer coach. Would you like to do it?" Wanted to earn some extra money. Honestly, that was it. And then once you start, it just starts sinking into your blood again. Couldn't get away from it.
Gotcha.
But that's how I first got started with it.
Yeah. So it's very intriguing. I was going to ask you kind of where that origin was of your last name. So you said Italy, Italian, and Greece is kind of your Greek is your history. So I may not look like it, right? I know I'm a wrestling guy and a football guy and some other sports, but I can tell you what, one of my favorite sports to watch is international soccer or football. I know soccer is an American name, but football at an international level. And so, like Italy at one point, right? Like Balotelli and some of the dudes that were really running Italy and stuff was always really fun to watch. So I actually spoke on this, I think the last episode with somebody, not necessarily about soccer, kind of, but like, where do you think America sits at in its realm of international soccer? I say that soccer, for one, I did say this. I made a bold prediction after the last World Cup. I said that United States at home is going to be a top 8 team. It was probably a little bit bold, but I thought that with Pulisic and some of these guys actually making their moves, might be a top 8 team. But another thing that I spoke on was that soccer may not ever be at that top of the world because, like in Argentina or Italy, right, the best players in that country are playing football or soccer, versus in America you don't see that. So I guess where I'm going with this is, where do you think American football stands now, but also where do you think, vision wise, where do you think it may be in 5 to 10 years from now? It seems like it is growing,
Yeah.
but yeah, where do you sit with it?
I mean, and this is just my own personal opinion. Because of, like you said, of all the other sports, it's the fastest growing sport amongst youth in the United States right now is soccer, which is crazy to think because we're still not number one. I think it's also that Americans are massively obsessed with stats in the sense of, if you go look at a football game, you've got field goal attempts, field goal tries, passing percentage, receptions, runs per
Right.
carry, baseball hits, on base percentage, basketball free throws, da da da. Whereas in soccer, you see a 0-0 game, and anybody who watches the sport can say it's one of the best games you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But a lot of Americans, the biggest thing is, there's not enough goals scored.
Yeah.
And anybody like yourself who comes from a sports, football, defensively, if you see a great defensive game, you're like, wow, man, what a great game.
Right.
Whereas I think that's been the biggest stigma as far as internationally with us, to try to latch on to the older generation, is the scoring part of it. I think our country has just got so much, where when you look at some of these other countries, I think it was the Honduras coach when we didn't qualify for the World Cup 8 years ago. I can't remember, I think it was 8 years ago. He said in Honduras, we get soccer balls for Christmas. In the US, you get iPhones. And I think that's a massive thing with our sport, is that it's such a massive country. There's so much for these kids to do with football, baseball, basketball, which all the other countries have. But when you're growing up in these countries and all you see is soccer 24/7, these kids become impassioned with it. It's just like, some of these kids in our country, they grow around football. Football is a massive sport, baseball. And you take your mother and your father's team, and they become your loyal team. And, I think that's a big part of it. Another problem I think that we have is our country is just too big. In Italy, you can take a train and you can get from one end of the boot to the very top in 6 to 8 hours. And that's on the train. So you can follow your team all around the country and watch games and then be back in time for work the next day. Whereas here, in Southern California, in 8 hours, you're maybe in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it's hard if you're an LA FC fan or LA Galaxy fan, and your team goes to play against the New York Red Bulls, or, to fly, it costs you thousands of dollars to, hotels. And it's hard to have that passion, or take your son or your daughter with you to you're traveling all over this country, and it's so big, and the amount of money spent just to follow is hard. Whereas in other countries, you go to a game and, it's $20-$25 to get in. Here, it's like, $50, $75, $100.
$100.
Yeah. You're going to get a drink for your kid, and it's $30 for a Coke. And, those are all those little factors factor into families, because soccer, again, is not a rich person's sport. It should be for the people. So when you go to some of these other countries, you're walking into a stadium, you buy yourself a drink and something, you're sitting there with your family. And I remember, $10-15. Granted, I'm an old man, but $10-15, and you're watching a game, you're eating a meal, you have a nice espresso at the end. Here, and I think that's a big part that deters a lot of people from getting involved in the sport. It's so costly to play.
Yeah.
These families are taking these kids every weekend to a tournament here, a tournament there, and it's $200-$400, and then hotels. And but I'm still one of these people. I'm optimistic, like you said. I think that having the World Cup here, shared it here with Canada and Mexico, I think that the U.S. I mean, how do you not have a talent pool to choose from? A massive country.
It really is. I mean, and there's so many things that just ran through my mind. I actually wrote down a few notes that I'm going to probably go back to. But the most recent thing you mentioned was like the AAU thing. And it seems like that's a pretty, travel team, right? I know that seems to be a really big thing that's kind of, and I know it's always been here, right? But it seems like the last 10, 12, 15 years, it's really been like, specifically the last 5 or 6, has really taken over like You got to go to these showcases. You got to go to these camps. You got to go to this, because all these coaches are going to be here, or it's going to put you in the best position to get to the next level, right? Whatever their expression is, and realistically, right? Like as you were mentioning about financials in other countries versus here, like we're spending so much, as you said, spending so much money to get kids to those camps, when realistically, like, what are these people doing in Argentina or in, Trinidad and Tobago or Cameroon that are really just like, they're literally just playing soccer every day with their friends, and that's how they're getting skills and whatever, right? Like they might not even have electricity like that where they come from, so they don't have YouTube to watch. They just, or whatever, right? But they're just getting better off of love. They're not doing these camps and stuff. So, I mean, I guess there's probably some pros to it, which I will ask you as well. Like when I ask some recruiting questions about that type of stuff, but I just had to double down on that because I do think that it's a big. Some sports probably benefit others than other sports, right? But the idea is that we do spend a lot of money on financials in sports.
And it's always that question: is it the best player in our country, or is it the best player with money in our country that you want?
That's the big thing. Yeah, that's very true.
When we talk about recruiting, I'll tell you I've got a WhatsApp group with 5 guys from Nigeria that are trying to come play at Cape Fear next year.
Oh, really?
And these guys are like, you got to see these videos that they send, and they're humble, and you got to see something that they, with the video and technology, you get to see their homes where they live in these little spots, and it's not like us, and like you said, they can't go to showcases.
Yeah, so they're figuring out a way to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trust in the process, if you would.
Yes, sir.
So like, and going back to like you said about, like you said, space in our country, but also just in general, like, I guess really at the beginning, like youth and the opportunity and about America, right? Like, I've always said this about my kids. Like, I grew up playing football, right? I grew up playing baseball, football for most of my life. And after I graduated from college, or after I was done with school and done with like my playing days, I don't even care if my kids play football. Like, I truly don't. Not because I don't want them to enjoy it, but because I'm not going to force them to go play football, just because I know what it caused me. I know what it caused people I know. And then obviously longevity of your body. But like on top of that, there's so many other sports that have more professional opportunities, right? And that's something that, as you were saying, like, well, soccer is, might be slow, might be this. Okay, that's fine. I understand that. But imagine they have like 8 different leagues in England that are professional, or in the UK, right? They have 3, at least 2 or 3 in America, right? You have X amount of leagues across the entire world in every single country or every single region, whatever. So the opportunity to go play professional football, soccer, is probably at a high right now. But our kids don't see that because, or whatever, right? They may not have that education because parents are kind of like, oh, soccer based, like the big 5, right, in America, or big 4, hockey, baseball, football, basketball, right? Kind of the big 4. So they just don't see that. So, but there's money opportunities to play and all the stuff that comes with it by playing soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big thing, is like you said, there's, I think, just in freaking countries like Bolivia, there's like 4 or 5 leagues. The guy in the bottom league is a milkman during the day, but he's still playing pro soccer in Bolivia, and he's doing what he loves to do. And so, like I always tell these kids, if you want to play, there's an opportunity somewhere for you. You can find it. You just, again, it's not going to be handed to you. You got to go find it. And it's things like that that I myself am trying to do here at Cape Fear, is give these kids this opportunity. Like, I do a lot of the groundwork for them. I try to educate them as much as possible on these little things. How many community college coaches are sitting there talking to these guys from Africa on WhatsApp, spending, hours with them, trying to explain to them the process.
Yeah.
And I think as you get older, that's what you give back. Like you said, once you're done, you give back to your kids and to the community, things like this. And that's the beauty of it.
And I'm jumping ahead a little bit to like past the few questions I have for you, but it kind of dives into what you just mentioned about you spending time talking to coaches. And in soccer, right, as you said, there's so many options. It's kind of like baseball, right? Like, not necessarily in that same sense, but they can get drafted, right, in baseball and go play right away, or wherever they are from a 2-year school, or I guess even high school. But in general, right, we're talking 2-year. They can go from the 2-year school to the professional ranks, or they can go play at the next level or at the next school. So I'm assuming that's something that your kids have the ability to do. And so like, I guess, how is that working for you as a coach? I know you said you spend time talking to kids and talking to coaches, I'm assuming, for athletes. So how does that look for you, knowing that they kind of have those two options, or obviously they can quit playing, but to continue their journey, they can obviously go play pro somewhere, or they can play at the next level. So kind of what is your approach to that as a coach?
I mean, now that I'm getting older, before it was all about my ego. I wanted to win. I was trying to move up the ladder. I started at JV. I did junior college. I got the blessings of being at a D1 school to learn. And now it's about, like I tell the kids, I would love for you to stay here 2 years to develop, because I know that what I do, I'm good at, in development of players and their talent and the right way to do it. But at the end of the day, if you want to leave after a semester, I'm going to still help you try to move on. If your dream is to go pro, we'll start sitting down trying to knock out where we can possibly, send you to. Once you get there, it's on you. Obviously, it's your skill and talent level. I have nothing to do with it. But if you want to stay for one semester, you want to stay for 1 year, God bless you. I'll do my best to get you where you want to go.
Right.
And if you stay for 2 years, obviously you'll be better. And again, that's my job, is to move you on. The biggest thing for me is I try never to, and it's very old school, I don't give them praise when praise is not due. And I don't keep a lie to them, in the sense of, I'll never tell them a lie just because I want them to stay here. I won't tell them that they can go play somewhere when they really can't. And it might be a slap in the face, in the sense of, man, that's hard. But, at the end of the day, I'm trying to set them up for success. And the only way to do that is by honestly being legit and saying, hey, look, you could possibly play at a high level D2 or at a low level mid-major D1, but you trying to go ACC or Pac-12, or it's not for you. It just, they might pick you up for one reason or another, maybe to make money, because every kid that comes goes to school there, puts money into the pocket of the university, but you're never going to see the playing field. I've been around the block way too long, and I know some of these coaches that you're trying to go to. So that's my biggest thing, is the first and foremost is honesty. It really is.
I mean, you were at an ACC school, right? I mean, which I'm gonna let you speak on here in just a minute. But as a coach, you were at an ACC school, so you obviously have seen what it takes to play and actually step foot on that pitch versus just going to the school. So I think that, like you said, it's old school, but I really think like transparency, and some coaches, I know for a fact that some coaches, whether today still happen or old school, right? They would say something to float the ego, and I think that tore down kids more than actually lifted them up, because when they get there, right, they're like, dang, I'm sitting on the bench at a D1 or even at a D2 versus I could have went and been a starter at this NAI or whatever, right? So I definitely think that, even though that might hurt some kids' feelings, I think it's going to benefit them in the long run, and hopefully they appreciate it. Even if they hate you right now, give it 10 years.
Exactly.
They'll be like, hey, coach, I just want to let you know what I'm saying? So, heck yeah. So then where did you compete at the next level? I know you said that you went, you moved from overseas to America, and you played soccer all the way through. So kind of where did you get to compete at the next level? And if so, where was that?
Yeah, I went to, it was called Wingate. It was Wingate College. It's Wingate University now. It's a D2 school outside Charlotte, North Carolina. And I know that right now they're even looking at the process. They're doing so well going D1 in athletics because they're such a good school. And it's changed a lot, obviously, as it's that old question, who's better, LeBron James or Michael Jordan? The errors are so different. Jordan coming in the lane was getting absolutely hammered. Whereas now if you touch anybody coming in the lane, it's a foul.
It's different. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so hard to compare. Athletes nowadays are just stronger and faster than I ever was in my day.
Right.
But the overall great tenacities, it will always remain. It's at the D2 level, it's more of athleticism. It's not the best players. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's players that are good on the touch but are very athletic. There are schools, like there's a school up in Pennsylvania called Messiah. It's a D3 school.
Yep.
On men's soccer, I think even in women's, they won like 10 of the last 12 or 13 national titles back in the day. So there are D1 and D2 schools that wouldn't play them, only because they knew that if they played Messiah and they lost, their RPI would go into the toilet, whereas Messiah was supposed to lose. They had nothing to lose from it.
Yeah,
But
of course.
there were some ballers that played up there, and it was one of those things where it's like, like I told the kids, don't look down on D3 or NAIA or D2, because a lot of these kids are D1 or bust, and I'm like, some of these D1 schools. Last year, we played a D1 school in the spring and beat them 3-2, and we're a community college.
Wow.
So So,
well, that it's important though, right? Because and if you listen to any of these other, especially from this season, I've dove into this quite a bit. But yeah, D1 or bust is a myth nowadays, and at least coaches and athletes should understand that if you want to play somewhere, you can find good games, good talent, good whatever you want, right? Social not experiment experience. All that stuff at a NAI school in Missouri or in Washington, right? It doesn't have to be, I'm going to LSU or I'm going to Texas, right? Or South Carolina or whatever, USC. So obviously there's some kids who can get there, but yeah, it's got to be about education, and kids got to understand what's more important. Are you going there to say I was on the roster, or are you going there to be that person? Now, if you're going to be that person, sure, of course, but I would hate to see you go there for the last 2 years or 4 years and not see the bench. You might get subbed in for 2 minutes in a 8-1 game, right, type of thing, versus being the starter at, I don't know, freaking whatever, right? I mean, Idaho State, right, whatever. So
it's that Instagram, Facebook. Parents. Oh, my kid's playing at a D1 school. Is he really though? Or is he just on the team?
yeah. And sometimes it's just ego thing, right? Like, I mean, I've gladly said I've said this about my experience, which I kind of skipped over your recruiting process, but just like mine, I really had 2 offers to go play or to wrestle. I could go to a JUCO. Back in the day, it was Arkansas Baptist over in Little Rock, or the Division II in Colorado. And not really thinking of how well I'm actually going to be able to transition into the next level, I took the D2, partially because of my own mental ego, but also because I thought I was more advanced than I was and didn't really dive into it a little bit more. And not like I've already said it multiple times, I appreciate everything I learned from there, right? All that stuff. They took a shot on me, but I think for me, realistically, going to that junior college probably would have been the best bet for me to actually not only get on the mat more, but also for me to develop to where then I could go compete better at a higher level school or whatever, right? But that was just because, as I said, or as you said, that D1 or bust, or that mentality, and my mom didn't really care, so I know you said parents say that, but as an athlete, that's who I was. So I mean I learned a lot. Obviously as a coach it's great because I can still teach what I've learned, but actual competition wise, I think it would have been better for me to go maybe this route first and then somewhere else. But education was something I needed a little bit more of. So
that's the big thing. I think a lot of it, especially, I don't know about a lot of the sports, but I know, with soccer, you get a lot of communities where it's first generation kids going to school. Mm-hmm. And without that education, parents are just like, I'm happy to send my kid wherever. They're not thinking of, like you said, playing at a JUCO for 2 years, getting the speed of play. Like myself now, this is only my second year here. We've already played 3 D1 schools, a ton of D2 schools that are winning their conference. Because for me, it's that speed of play that these kids need to learn, so that when they go to a D2 or D1, they're like, oh yeah, I used to do that. I understand, because coach prepped me for 2 years for that speed, as opposed for me littering, again, becoming about my ego, where I'm 14-0, but I've littered our schedule with a bunch of, puff games that we're just walking over teams, and then they go play the real games and we get smacked around.
Yeah.
And again, that's not what I want. Just this year alone, we started 0-4, 0-5, and people are like, what are you doing? Because who I brought in was the number 1 team in JUCO in the country out of Florida, the number 6 team out of Kansas, JUCO team in the country came here out of Kansas. I brought teams that won their conference in D2, and we're just getting smacked around for the first 4 games. And then all of a sudden, we play a D1 school, Elon University, got smacked by them. And then all of a sudden, the kids had an epiphany. They're like, wow, what coach is saying is right. And we go on a 6-game tear. and we make it all the way to we win the region for the first time in 15 years for the school. We make it to the district finals. We lose to a better team. But again, they're all freshmen. But it was that beginning stage where everybody's calling me crazy for setting it up and God, they need to win. They need to win. I'm like, no, they need to steel forges steel. It truly does, in my opinion. And then all of a sudden, after we got smacked by that D1 school, they turn around and they just run rampant for 6 straight games. And we beat the team that we were a 4th seed in our conference. We were on the road the whole time. We're just running rampant through people. Yeah. Because again, it was that beginning stage of them getting smacked around and understanding what we're trying to do that forged them for later in the season. So again, I think with coaches, it's just putting the ego aside.
For sure. Well, I think that's important too. Like I know when like my coach is in high school specifically always put us in front of really good talent. And that's what I did when, my very first year of coaching, I took my kids to New Mexico's toughest in-season tournament. I took us to an Arizona, probably top 4 Arizona tournament. And then I took us to, I don't know what they rated, but probably top 2 or top 3 in Utah's like in-season tournament. So I took us to some of the toughest tournaments in season because for one, I want them to see different wrestling styles, different talent levels, but also that helps because then when we come back and we wrestling, when we get to that districts or regional, or we get to the state tournament, they've seen people that are at the same caliber or better or whatever, right? They see different things. So like, not only will it help them understand like you said, speed of the, in my case, wrestling, but on the pitch, but also it just gets them more mentally like, hey, I've wrestled people who are tougher than this. What am I doing? Or in your case, right? I've played a D2. Why am I worried about this junior college? I don't care what their ranked are. I've faced a D1 guy or whatever, right? Whatever the mental that comes from it. So I think it's all about like mentally getting them to peak when you want them to. And sometimes it's letting them get beat by a team that we should lose to, but now you see the game, right? So I think it's just a matter of putting them in the best position.
It's just like you said at wrestling. I mean, that's one of the truest sports that I love to death. It's, you get a guy in a whatever the weight class is, 150, 160, whatever the weight class is. There's a difference between a kid who's a JUCO at that weight class and a D1 kid that's at that weight class. It's his movements. It's the speed in which he executes those movements. And if you're not as good and you see that, you can learn from that. And like, okay, so then when you go back into your round, same weight class, but the kids aren't as proficient or dynamic as a D1, kid.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, your mind just starts to go, okay, now I'm going to do this. And the game slows down. It slows down because you've played the better competition. And everything slows down for you, which is good, especially in our game, because the field just looks slower. And if you play at pace and slower, everything goes slower, you're starting to pick people apart.
Yep. That's why that's exactly what NFL quarterbacks do. The faster that game slows down, the better they become, So hell yeah. I mean, I think that for one, this is going to be a good episode. This is going to be good. I love it already. Hell yeah. This is good. So then when did you realize, like whenever you kind of going back to you a little bit, because trust me, I have some recruiting questions. I have some stuff about the coaching philosophies that I know that if I keep talking about it, I'm just going to dive into it. But I want to hear this part first, selfishly. So when did you realize that you could compete at the next level? Was it, was it like coaches coming to talk to you? Was it you competing against certain team that had certain people on it? I mean, what is it like for you? What was your aha moment to like, oh, I can go play college soccer?
I was always, I was blessed by God, honestly. I was a lazy training kid. Like my brother always said, I had more talent than my brother, but my brother had a better work ethic than me. I was just touched by God. I had speed. I had a left foot that was like a cannon. And to me, it was always that. And the minute it clicked to me where if I actually put some work into it, I could see how good I was. And then from there, it was just having a mentor or a coach at a point where it just says, hey, Giovanni, if you actually trained this way. And it was just that aha moment where like, yeah, you know what? He's right. And then my training got better. And I've always had that mentality of, I just don't like to lose. I hate losing. When the county national team loses in soccer, I go into mourning still. I'm miserable. I'm a miserable. My wife, I'm just a miserable person to be around. And I always had that ever since I was a kid. I I hate losing. I love to compete. I think competition is an amazing thing. I'm still extremely hard on myself. And the kids even see, when there's a ball lofted at training and it's just coming anywhere near me and I put my foot up to stop it. When I have a bad touch, I get down on myself about it.
What the heck am I doing?
Lose or gain from it.
Yeah.
It's inbred in us as competitors. But that's just when I had it. I had that thing where, I'm banging in goals. I was a natural goal scorer. And then when I got on that trail and coaches were telling me that, hey, you can do this, you can do this. It's just like you said, it fed into my ego. And Wingate was a spot for me because, they weren't that great of a team. I go in as a freshman, I lead the team in goal scoring. And that even fed my ego even more.
Of course, yeah.
And so it's things like that. But then, as you get older, you just get more on the giving back more to community type. But as a youth, I just wanted to score goals. And, again, what was it about? It was about going to school, playing soccer, girls. The girls came to the game, scored goals, and life was great.
Yeah. You were in heaven whenever you're on that.
Exactly.
Yeah, with all that work together. Yeah,
I
understand.
19
completely.
years old, you're 18, 19, 20 years old, and you go into parties and people know you because of that.
You actually invite somebody to a game and you're actually on the field playing and you do something well. Yeah, it's like I told you I was that guy.
Football players are like, geez.
Yeah. Out of the 22, number 84, invite somebody to come. Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, but yeah, no. I mean, it's cool though, right? That's kind of your reckoning moment, and you were able to take that to the next level and actually perform at that level for not only yourself but for your team. So was there ever a coach who made an impact on your life? And if so, who? And it could be more than one, but what coach made that impact on your life? Who was he or she, and why?
As a player or as coach?
When you were playing, yeah. So whenever you were in, and it could be, I guess it could be really anything in life, right? But like, what coach impacted you in what ways and why? And I guess you could take that in any way.
Yeah, it was always my father. In all honesty, because unfortunately, back in the days, when you come in, especially in high school, in soccer, we're talking about, early 90s, man, they got their information from an encyclopedia, I think, or I don't even know where back of
the source. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that just wasn't the technology or the advanced, like coaches didn't even have to have licenses as they do now. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of it came from just growing up in a European household with a father that, taught us the game. Always, every time we went to a game, it was always like, hey, Dad, I scored 2 goals. Yeah, but you missed 3 that you could have banged in, and then explaining to you how you could correct those mistakes. Even though he wasn't physically my coach, he was always my coach at home and in the car. Extremely honest. He wasn't like my mother. He was very brutally honest. Like you said, I hated it at the time, but now you respect it so much because that honesty is what got me better. Sure. So he was always the driving force for me, was my father.
Gotcha.
Coaching wise.
I mean, it sounds like some of that stuff that even though you hated it at the time, going back to what you said about you don't sugarcoat stuff with your athletes is something that you still pass along to your athletes in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, I know you're not like father. I mean, you might be father figure to some of these kids, but obviously you're still taking some of those dynamics that you were taught by your dad as and passing that along to your kids.
Yes,
I'm sure that's important for sure.
Yeah. And that's what makes it so meaningful for me is when you get a message. I got a message when I first started here. I think at the beginning of this year, there was a kid that went to San Diego. He was 10 years old. I hadn't seen him in 8 years. And he emails me. I haven't talked to this kid in 8 years.
Yeah.
And he was a 10-year-old club player that I had coached. And he's getting ready to go as a freshman in college. He goes, I don't know if you remember me, but you're the one that instilled this work for me to get to college. And the passion that I have today was instilled by you. And he was a U10.
Yeah.
So those are the moments, man, that make it like these kids that I have now in these past 2 years here. It's a blessing being around them. And like you said, a father figure for them.
Right.
And I can't let them know how much I love them, but
of course, yeah. We'll keep it under wraps, but yeah, for sure, I understand. I gotcha. So I know you. So you kind of dove into like when you decided you got into coaching, or you kind of talked about like how you were in LA and you had a friend who was a JV coach. You kind of talked about that was like fell back into your lap of coaching. So I guess kind of tell us your timeline, I guess, like how long you've been coaching, when that was, and then kind of what your timeline was from that first JV coach to now being at Cape Fear.
Yeah, so I was a JV coach. The biggest thing for me is I was a junior varsity high school coach. And then I was there for 1 year and I got the job as a varsity coach at another high school. So I was the coach of the varsity, but I also ran their JV team as far as hiring the coaches and the sophomore team. So again, it started my trek down the whole dynamic of not just managing one team, but how to oversee a bigger project, and then from there, I got a job as a junior college coach. And then from junior college, I got a D3 job, head coaching job.
Okay.
And then while I was at the D3 job, and that's the thing, it's like for me, a lot of people are like, oh, I want that big D1 job. I was completely the opposite because I was like, if I get that D1 job when I'm not ready at 20 some years old and I messed it up, there goes my name. I'm done.
Yeah.
So I did every step of the ladder. And when I was coaching the D3 team, I actually got an opportunity to play versus Duke. And the way I was on the sideline against Duke is the way I'm on the sideline against anybody. So I want the big dogs. I was going after them. And those guys are the ones that after 2 years at the D3 school, I went to be an assistant with them for 3 years. And those guys, John Kerr Jr. and Mike Brady, they're still there, were my biggest mentors coaching wise. When you go into a program like that, the level of respect they showed me, the absolute love that they showed me, the learning, the allowing me to be at every session, speaking at team meetings, always tried everything. They always had us involved in it. And they were absolutely, and how hard they were on the players, but, hardness, but with coaching involved.
Of course. Yeah.
So they were my biggest mentors coaching wise. It was absolutely a brilliant 3 years for me. And actually this year we just went to play when we went to Knoxville, playing the districts. We stopped off in Duke and we went to a game and they were getting ready to play Notre Dame. And he was such a gentleman in the sense that he came out, met the boys, and remember, he's getting ready to play a game, met the boys, took them through the locker room and everything, and had my team walk through the locker room, weight room, their hype room, the team rooms, all that stuff, man. It was brilliant. And I hadn't seen them or been around that program since 2013. So you're talking about a decade later.
Dang. Yeah.
It still treats me with class, man.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's amazing for sure. That you're able to get your kids to experience that, and that you guys had that type of relationship between you and that coach. And so, I mean, I can say this. It sounds like you've really worked your way from, I wouldn't say middle schools are probably the start, but really you started from a really, just your traditional high school level to getting to that essentially the highest level possible, right? Without the head coach title, but coaching wise, you got to the highest level. Yeah. And now you get to run your own program. So
and that set me up to San Diego State, because when we moved back, I was going out there and John put a phone call in to get an interview with the San Diego State guy. And I latched on there. And that's where I became, San Diego's where I latched on to be a scout with U.S. Soccer, and to this day, I still scout for U.S. Soccer.
That's crazy. Oh, yeah. Okay. So far, I mean, to be honest with you, this is a very, very good one. I have so many questions, especially the fact that you're like a scout for the United States and all this stuff. So I don't know where my mind's going to go with this. I have questions I like to ask, but I'm very intrigued with this. So I may not get to all of them. So Coach, hope you're ready for some of those. And if you guys like any of those questions, sorry if I skip any of your favorites, but let me ask this one question about kind of before we transition into the final questions that I have written, and then I have some recruiting stuff. So what do you love about coaching, and what is something that you dislike about it, if there is anything that you dislike about it?
I love how you can see the results in these kids. I think at the collegiate level, I love when they move on, and then you see them prosper at a different level. And then you see them a couple years down the road. And when they just tell you those little nuggets like, hey, man, you're the one that made a difference in my life. I think that's the best part of it. That's the part I love the most. The only part I dislike, it's not more so the coaching part of it. It's more the admin part of it where, especially at junior college, you don't have the money that that these kids could benefit from. Just training facilities to equipment to you're on the road and you're eating McDonald's as opposed to, some of these higher, like I said, the Alabamas where they're probably having chicken and steak and, that's the only part that I don't like, but I do truly understand it. Every school is not built the same. But I love every part of being on that field.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So like when it comes to the recruiting side of things, which by the way, I 100% understand, like, and one of my questions I actually do like to ask, which I guess I can ask since we're on the topic of how schools are built, is like, how do you see, I know I already asked you about like the sport of soccer or football in America, but like, how is it for you being at a junior college when it comes to these type of resources, right? Like soccer, I know there's a lot of money involved in American soccer, but like when it comes to collegiate soccer, how is it faring against some other levels when it comes to like resources of either finding athletes, getting athletes in, or like you said already, kind of like the financial side of things? I mean, is it difficult for you to, I guess in general, like to either find resources or to maintain them or to grow them, being a junior level college for soccer?
Yeah, you'll go to these events and you'll walk up to a field because, like you said, there's this big showcase events and there's 10, 20 fields. You walk up and you sit down, and if you look to your left and there's a Duke, and you look to your right and there's a Carolina, you just get up and walk away because that any of those kids on that field you're not going to touch just because of money side. So you have to find games where you can't really go after the as they say, what is it, the 5-star recruits in basketball. Unfortunately, you can't get those kids only because these bigger schools have the money and the resources. You're bringing in these kids to facilities where they can, we don't even have a weight room, where they can, lift weights, and they have a nutritionist and a strength and conditioning coach. And, that's the hard part. But then again, you'll get there's some really good talented kids that don't want to go to those big schools because they love the small school environment. In Wilmington, we're at the beach. I mean, if you've ever seen Outer Banks or somewhere like Turner Pretty, that's where we live. They filmed Iron Man 3 here. So, we've got a beautiful environment here. It's just, you've got to find that right kid.
And so do you think that so I know you mentioned earlier about the international players from Nigeria and things like that. So do you have a advantage because of the fact that you are a scout of being able to find international kids or how was it being a scout for Team USA, but also having to scout for Cape Fear? Like, how do you differentiate the two? And are you, is there any ever worries of biases of obviously, or maybe as you said, this kid, because of his talent level, is going to be able to compete for Team USA versus this kid is not there yet, so maybe I can recruit him for me. Is that kind of how you have to go about things?
Yeah, internationally, this is actually going to be our very first year we're allowed to bring international. They've never allowed internationals at our school.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so it's going to be a trial and error thing of it. A lot of these kids think that because they play in another country, they're really good. That's a myth, as we well know. There's good players in the U.S. too that are better than some of these kids. Like I say, Pulisic's playing in Italy right now and just killing it. We have a lot of Americans overseas, and you never would have heard about that 20 years ago. But
right. For sure.
Yeah, but with the scouting on the U.S. side, we've got depth charts. So when we go to watch kids, we see pretty much the cream of the crop of these kids that are playing, and we go to events where it's a lot more higher.
I see.
Higher lawn events. With the community college, you try to go to these bigger events, but in all honesty, sometimes you go to a high school game, and you would never do that for scouting for on the U.S. side, because high school soccer's, they pretty much take anybody who comes out because that's, the part of the high school sports. So, you have to just switch off your brain in a certain way. But like I tell the kids, I treat the kids at Cape Fear the same way we trained at Duke, the same way we do at the U.S. training centers. I train them the exact same way. I'm just as hard as them. The sessions these kids in 2 years have never done the exact same training session. Every single session is always different. And, that's the thing is that, you have to take the time to put in for these kids so that you keep their minds curious when you do something new all the time.
Do you think that it's an advantage? Is that something that you use when you recruit kids, on the level of coming to Cape Fear? Hey, like, do you use that badge of saying I'm a United States Scout and I have the history of that to like get kids in?
When they ask me what I do, I'll tell them what I do, what I don't. I try not to mix the two, but if they ask me where I've been, it's on my resume. I'm very proud of it. But if they say, "Hey, what else do you do, Coach?" I just say I scout, and I leave it at that. And that's where
Really?
But
Okay.
I do think it piques the curiosity. They're like,
Yeah.
"Wow, what are you doing to the community college?" Is always the first thing, and I'm like, "Look, this is my final stop. My wife and I bought a home here. We're done. This is my final stop." And that just goes to like that old thing that we talked about, where it's like D1 or bust, and that's just not me. I'm very happy where I'm at. You're training kids, and you're pushing them on. No matter what I do, I could be the highest ranking official in the world if there ever was one for soccer. But I love where I'm at right now. Sometimes being at these big schools, there's a lot of drawbacks to that too. There's a lot of
pressure.
ways, yeah. So I love where I'm at. I love my admin. I love my athletic director. I'm a happy man.
Hell yeah. It's hard. It's whenever you're in those positions, it's an amazing feeling, So do you feel like, when it comes to recruiting, I know you said you can differentiate and stuff like that. Are you looking a lot of, like, I guess pipeline wise, are you kind of focusing on the North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, Tennessee area? Or are you kind of looking at on a national scale to get kids in? And are you using other resources like NCSA? What is your, I guess, approach to finding kids to come play for you?
The blessings of being around and going to some of these D1 schools and people that you meet through the grapevine and with U.S. Soccer. I'm also an instructor as well. So I was an instructor for many years at U.S. Soccer. So any coach that had to come through the pipeline, I was an instructor for a lot of these level courses. So you meet a lot of people. The coaching world's small. So I'll tap into all those guys. I'll call guys and text guys in California that I've known for 20 years now. Like, hey, if you've got a kid that doesn't have the grades and junior college, the grade levels are a little bit different than a Stanford or Harvard. So hey, send them to me for 1 year and I'll send them back to you. So I'll get a high level kid that's D2, D1 caliber kid, but just doesn't have the grades. I get his grades up for a year and I send him back to my buddy who's a coach somewhere else.
So you're doing not only the high school level like that, but you'll do the bounce back kids who go to a whatever school and they just end up having a rough first or second year or whatever, probably first year, and you get them to do that. That's cool. Yeah, I know that's a big thing. Like,
I had a kid last year that was that. Yeah, I had a kid last year that he was a D1 kid that didn't have the grades. He came to me for a year, and we just sent him off after a year. So we did that last year. It's with me, it's just putting in the work. I'll use all those, NCSA, the recruiting tools. I'll go to tournaments. I'll hit email after email. I do as many ID camps as I can. Obviously, I want to keep it a lot. I want to look at internationals too, just because there's some talent out there. But I definitely want to keep it American homegrown. I think that's the only way we build our country's soccer is by developing those players. If we just go and buy it. If we do the Kentucky, the Kentucky one and dones, what are we really developing?
Yeah, no, I understand. I definitely understand that side of things. So, like, I know, like, Last Chance, you kind of glorified junior college. I don't know if you had a chance to ever watch that on Netflix. So, at any point about like the football or basketball, and so personally, I think junior college is like a fascinating world. Like, it's two and done. You have such a short timeline to get athletically what you need, but also like academically and all this stuff. And as a coach, I find it really intriguing because you have to be probably more things than, not saying that I don't know, but I know that you have, like, obviously it's a stricter time frame. So you have to be almost on your ball game or on your A game, maybe a little bit more than you would be at a 4-year school, just because you have to do certain things if you want to be what your job is as that junior college coach. It has a little bit more of a timeline than you might be at a 4-year school, I would assume. So I think it's super fascinating.
Right. No, you are 100% right, because having 2 years to develop a kid as opposed to 4, you've got to take everything and be, like you said, on your A game from the jump. Everything you do, you don't have time to waste. You don't have a year to waste. If you waste a year, you don't have 3 years. You waste a year, you got 1 left. So you got to make sure that these kids are developing ASAP. It's like you said, it's there's goods and there's bads to it, but I love being in that cauldron of pressure. I love doing it. The kids have been great these past few years.
So how do you build a successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset?
With me, it just starts from the very get-go, the very first day. It's kids, if they don't start buying into doing it. The first year was really more on the difficult side, but I took them to play a D1 school last year, their very, very first game, because as soon as I got in, all the kids thought they were D1 caliber. So I called up a buddy of mine and said, "Hey man, let's give me a scrimmage." We got smacked. They came back home and they could have gone one of two ways. They could have gone like, "Coach has no idea what he's talking about." But then they went this other route and they're like, "Man, Coach knows exactly. He's right. We're not D1 caliber." So they bought into the culture that I was like, "Hey, this is how you play the game. This is what you need to get to that level." Yeah. So those guys bought in. So that first year helped this year, because the kids who came in, they were sophomores. I had 7 sophomores this year. As soon as the freshmen arrived, they're like, "Hey, this is the way things are." So that culture starts to mold. And now I've got a massive freshman class that next year's group will get the exact same treatment. Like, yeah, we come to training. We speak the way we speak. We're very in your face. If you give somebody a bad pass, I want the players to say, "Hey man, give me a better pass." I tell the players that if the guy starts to tear up, give him a hug afterwards in the parking lot. It's not about friendship. It's you have a high standard, and don't ever let somebody bring you down on your standards because they're softer about things or because you're going to hurt your feelings. I was like, just keep the high standard, and the cream of the crop. You want to surround yourself with people that are like that in life. And that's the thing. It's not just soccer or sports. In life, you want to be surrounded by people that have high standards. Who doesn't?
Yep.
And you start that from day one. I've kicked players out of training for not listening, or, I tell them from day one, if somebody's speaking, you're looking at them, and, kids bend down and start fixing their shin guards. I kick them out of practice during preseason. And that sends a ripple effect through the.
You understand. Yeah. But you gotta treat your best kid, or you gotta treat your worst kid the same as you treat your best kid, or vice versa. Right. So it's definitely a way to build culture. I 100% agree with that. And so, like, do you find it difficult to get kids to, right? Like you said that you've taken these kids to play top, mid-major teams or maybe higher level teams in D1, D2 and all this stuff. Do you find it difficult to actually develop kids to get to that level in 2 years, right? Like I know, like, for example, if you said, "Hey, we're going to go play Ohio State or University of Oklahoma or whatever," right? And like you have juniors and freshmen and sophomores, and you're competitive or beat these seniors that have, they have 8 seniors on their team. Like, do you find it difficult to get your kids in that short span to be able to be competitive, or is it more of like they bought in, and obviously bringing in that type of talent also helps too? But like, do you find that a difficult thing to actually be able to go and compete with those and with freshmen and sophomores?
Yeah, it is at the beginning. It's the biggest accolade we got were from these D1 coaches. They're like, no matter what the score is, because we're losing 6-0, 7-0, we lost 8-1. We scored against but they're like, your team never stops playing the right way. Like, we'll play on the ground, fast paced. We're getting stuck in the tackles. So for me, it's that coach remembering that, so that after last year, we sent 5 of our kids after just one season to D2 schools to play, which was good for us, and it's that mentality, because those coaches are like, "Yeah, I remember playing you guys. Your kid gets stuck in the tackles. He's gritty. He's a fighter. He's got the technical ability, because we know how you develop the technical side of it." So now they're getting a kid and they'll get for 2 years where they don't have to teach that grit part, because that's the hardest part. It's the heart.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? So it's like, if a kid gets stuck in, the coach is like, "Yeah, I don't have to teach that. Now I just have to develop their technical a little bit more to suit our environment of D1, D2. But, in your face, I'm going to punch you in the mouth." That's done with me in 2 years.
Hell yeah. I like that. So, that's sick. Yeah. So then how do you develop so I guess that leads to this question, is how do you build a successful program on the level of wins and longevity, and how do you sustain it over time?
Yeah. I think longevity, one class starts bleeding into another. I think if you're strong and you're honest and you don't change your culture to, like you said, suit the best players, where it's like, "Oh, it's okay for you to miss practice, or it's okay for you to," I think that it's the Lord of the Flies, and they basically they monitor themselves at some point. Right now, in August and September, the kids were the biggest this year, the biggest puffs out there. They were just running around. They didn't have a character, and then all of a sudden, they had a team dinner. I wasn't invited, and you knew exactly what was being said because they were losing. They came to training, and you just saw this morph that you could tell that the sophomores took these freshmen and said, "This is the way we are. We're going to live and die by the sword." And it was things that they learned last year under me, and that's what makes me happy as a coach, because basically the older guard starts taking the young bucks under the wing. So now I'm hoping the kids that we keep, the young bucks, will now be the old guard next year, and they'll take those guys. That's how I personally think that's how you maintain it. Now the wins and losses, in all honesty, the ball's round, man. Sometimes you play the better game and you lose. My grandmother, when I was a kid, said it's called la palla de rotonda. That means the ball is round. And my grandmother used to always say that when I was a kid in Italy. It's like, you can play the best game and the ball's round, it bounces the wrong way and you're done. So I try. That's what I say. I don't harp on anything, especially the kids. If they have a bad training session, we talk about it and it's done the next day. We don't harp on games. We can't go back in time. I can't invent a DeLorean from Back to the Future and go back in time.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, like, I just watched, like, I'm a big Texas fan in pretty much every sport, right? Like, wrestling is a certain sport and college basketball is a certain sport, but I'm a big Texas pretty much everything else. And I watched the girls versus South Carolina in the SEC championship. South Carolina had an own goal right before half, and it kind of flipped the momentum to Texas, and at that point it just went that way. So for 100%, it can, same thing with wrestling, right? You make one tiny mistake in body position, and you might get stuck when you were up. I've seen plenty of times where, like, somebody's winning 8-2, 10-1, right? Whatever, they're dominating, but then they make a mistake, and then they ended up getting turned or pinned or whatever, and they were the better wrestler for 2.5 periods or whatever, right? So 100%, anything athletically, you never know. But if you do all the things right, you're putting yourself in the best. Like you said, if you're doing all the other things up until game day and you have the right culture, blah, 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 you're going to be in the best position to win no matter what, right? So I think that's how you get that successful program.
I mean, did you see by chance the Stanford, Lord, who was it? Stanford and Stanford Notre Dame game in the playoffs. So it's tied. Did you see that where he kicks the ball 70 yards, and the keeper, you can see he starts to go up and he thinks he's over the post and he pulls his arm down and he goes in. And I showed it to my players. I said, "What is we said from day one? Don't ever assume a ball is out of bounds. So you always play it until you know and you see it drop." That's a culture. That's a mindset. This poor kid, this goaltender, is never going to forget this.
Yep,
he pulled his hands down just a little bit because he thought it was out.
Yep. No, that was a crazy shot. I mean, same thing like back in the day, like Wayne Rooney, right? Whenever he came to America and he did that big nasty chase down, and and he did a big whatever, it was like a 60-yard cross from the far side to, I don't even know who it was. I don't know if Yedley was on his team, but whoever that big wing, that left wing hit that header in, like they came back to win that game, and like that guy probably thought that he was able to outrun Rooney, and he just had that heart in him. So like you said, I think it's just a culture thing. It's how you play the game. So,
and he learned that 100%. And he learned that under Sir Alex Ferguson, Manchester United. He learned that culture. He comes to DC United, and he could have just taken the day off. He still would have gotten paid his millions, but he didn't, because it's a cultural thing. And that's what I love about our game.
Yeah, soccer's definitely it's the most watched sport in the world. So it's 100%. So, do you have any tips or advice for new or struggling coaches out there?
New coaches and even struggling, man, do your homework. Don't you can always learn. In all honesty, I don't always want that big job. Take the time to stay at the lower levels, because you'll learn so much. You'll pick little nuggets of information from kids, from players. You'll try a session that doesn't work, which is great. There's a lot of times I'll go out and I'll look at a session, but it just doesn't work. And that's how you learn, and don't be scared to fail. Don't be scared that if something's not working during the session. A lot of these coaches will sit there and go, "Oh, I'm not going to move a cone because I don't want the kids to think that I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. Move the cone. If it's not working, it's not working. Everybody makes
Yeah.
mistakes. You know,
Right.
we all make mistakes. We're all human. The best part is, can you adapt to it? Can you change? You see a mistake, the cone's too close in, you move the cone. It actually shows a lot more that you as a coach realize it's too close of a quarters and you're opening it up. And, you know,
Change.
it
Yeah.
shows a lot more. It shows the kids that, hey, coach can adapt on the fly,
Yep.
you know,
For sure.
and, you know, it's not about you. Remember, it's always about the kids. No
Yep.
matter what age they are, man, if you're older than them, they're kids to you. So
100%. I agree. So I have a few questions left. I have some fun ones to kind of end it, but I have one more about your philosophy, and it's the name of the podcast. And kind of, you know, my favorite question is, you know, what is your why? Why, you know, why do you coach? What's your coach's why?
my why is to give back. You know, again, as I get older in life, this sport gave me everything. My parents were blue collar people. I never would have afforded to be able to go to college. So it gave me the money to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me to do all the things that right now are providing for me and my family. It's allowing me to see different areas of the country when I go with U.S. Soccer to go do these centers. You know, it allows me to do all the things I want to do, and that's why. And I hope to one day, you know, touch a kid. That the kid says, "Hey, I remember Coach Gio. I want to be a coach as well." And it starts that pathway of giving back, you know, and they start to develop kids for our future, so that one day the U.S. can win the World Cup.
Yeah.
That's why I do it.
I like it. You want to give back to inspire somebody to then pass it on and just keep on going. So I like that. I know you mentioned earlier, like you're hard on yourself, and you know, sometimes it's hard to. You're hard on yourself as a coach, right? So this is not a question I wrote down, but I wrote it down earlier and I forgot to ask about it. But like, so how do you overcome that? And I know there's probably a lot of coaches, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is "Comparison is the thief of joy." And
I like that.
you know, you could kind of take that wherever you are in life, right? You could take that. That's just something I've always thought about, and so that probably kind of plays down like on yourself as a coach. I'm sure, as you said, like you're hard on yourself on just little things, and I'm sure sometimes on big levels too. So how do you kind of overcome either being hard on yourself or when that thought is of like, we should have done this, right? Or like, as I mentioned, you're comparing yourself to other things, right? Oh, I should have did this. I should have did this, whatever. How do you overcome it and, you know, get to the next stage to where you can grow from it?
Yeah, I usually overcut. It takes me at least a day. I try to just go in and I think self reflection is the biggest thing. You know, if I know I prepared every outlet for the boys, in other words, if we get scored on a set piece and all week we worked on set pieces, then I can say, hey, I did my job. I did all the things. I went through everything. It was just they were better than us on that set piece. But if there's things where it's like they beat us on a set piece, and I know all week we never worked on a set piece, then I self reflect, going, "Hey, you know what? I took this down. From now on, every week we're gonna spend at least one session on the set piece, so that I don't let these kids down because I let them down by not doing X, Y, and Z today
100,
or this week."
100%. Yeah, I think, that's something you know, me and my coaches, we focused on heavily at the beginning of the year is, you know, specifically at the beginning of the year, but kind of throughout the year. But we watch matches. Obviously, we're in the corners, but as they go, we're like, oh man, we just got beat by this front headlock, or we just got beat by this double. And you know, that's actually one thing where, you know, I had a girl who. We had some guys too who had some stuff that they needed to work on too when they got to the state tournament and stuff. But we had a girl who she hasn't really faced a girl of that caliber. At least I didn't. She did, but this girl was just really fast and she was a double leg shooter. And you know, one thing I thought about was like, dude, I don't know if we really truly worked on like double legs outside of this one thing, defense wise. And you know, I felt so bad, and that was in the state finals. You know, and so that was one thing that, you know, was kind of hard to look into. But yeah, I think self-reflection is, as a coach, has got to be a top priority. Just and even as a staff too, right? Like, what did my coaching staff do? What did I tell my coaching staff to do? And then did they relay that properly or whatever, right? Like, as a whole staff, we get together and talk about it, and I think that's very important, at least in my opinion. So
Absolutely.
that's definitely a big piece. Now, I will say before we get into these final fun questions, I will say to you that this was a top tier episode, and I think I would love to have you back on. And
Thank you. I'd love to be on.
of course. And the second time around, so if you guys are listening at this point, you guys have already seen the episode, the comeback, if you would, on what to expect. So, Coach, whenever your episode comes out, the episode before yours, go listen to that one, because that's kind of how the role is. But we dive into how, like, philosophies, training sessions, kind of like how you get your athletes to peak, right? Kind of truly diving into the coaching side of things a little bit more than just philosophies. So, and you don't have to give up your schemes, right? I know,
I love that, man. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, and I dive into the actual sport itself, like.
I love to be on. Just to tell you, man, you're absolutely fantastic, man. It was a blessing just being here and being asked to do this, man, and being the first soccer guy on. But just to know, man, you're fantastic, man.
I appreciate it, man. I can tell you it's come a long way from where it started, and I appreciate those kind words, man. And, next time you come on, hopefully I'm even better, so I 100%, I really appreciate that, man. I do. But I hope you like these last few questions I have for you. If you guys are still listening, make sure you guys HTB hit the bell if you're on YouTube, all the 9 yards. If you guys are in audio, you guys leave a review, hit the stars, say what you got to say, but whatever you say with your chest, because we want to hear it. So, Coach, here is your final few questions. Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
All right. There you go. All right. I'm glad you said that. I know there's some people out there with that are going to argue with Ronaldo, but I'm also a Messi believer. No one else has done what he's done on the level of awards and winning everything possible. So I think he is absolutely the best player in this generation. Now, I'm going to second that question is, who's the best player to ever step foot on the pitch?
For me, I got to go with my countryman, Paolo Maldini. I mean, okay. Defensively, nobody wanted to face him. Absolutely a legend for me.
Yeah. Okay. I will respect them. Yeah, he's a top tier soccer player, football player. My personal guy is Ronaldinho. I love Ronaldinho. Yeah. He's one of my favorites. I don't know what it was, but something about him. Even just like watching him now that he's way out, but every time you see him with the ball, he's just having fun. And
I know, right?
I think he's one of the best to ever do it. So fair. Okay. I respect Maldini. What's the best country in the world right now for we're gonna ask two-part off this, international soccer, and then also what's the best league in the world? So La Liga, whatever, right? MLS, whatever you want to say. Those two.
For league, I think it's the English Premier League, only because the quality of coaches and players and just the pace of their game. The pace in the English Premier League is undeniably amazing. And I think top to bottom, the teams are stacked that anybody can beat anybody, where, like La Liga and even Serie A, there's 3, 4, maybe 5 teams that compete. The rest are just competing to stay, to not get relegated.
Relegated.
In France, there's 2 or 3 teams, and same thing in Germany. There's always Bayern Munich and the Leverkusen, Van der Broek and Leipzig. But I think in England, top to bottom, Ipswich just beat Tottenham last week. I think that's the league. Internationally, I'll never go against my Italians, even though the
Italians, okay,
even though they've killed me because they were lazy as can be in the Euros, and then not qualifying for the World Cups and all that. But I can never ever say any team's name out of my mouth other than the Italians.
It's got to be Italian.
I'll say Greece if I don't have Italy, but other than that, I'll never. Internationally, I'll always bleed Italian blue, and I'll never say anything. I'll never wear another jersey, other than the U.S. So
respect. Okay, so I have 2 more questions for you. What's the best state in America for high school soccer right now?
High school?
Yeah.
I'm going more towards. It's more so regions.
Okay.
Warmer climates have been doing, I think, a lot better because, these climates like, say, Buffalo, New York, where they're playing in the winter, a lot of times these kids have to go train indoors, and anybody who's played in those indoor training because of snow or the weather, whereas kids in Southern California, Texas, Florida are always outside because of the beautiful weather. So they're able, if they have the proper coaching, they should be able to develop a lot better due to climate. That's why a lot of these South American American teams are so amazing at the sport because of the climates.
Okay. So my final question for you is, who's your favorite player ever when it comes to the game of football?
Ever. I mean, how do you go against like Pelé or Maradona? But I mean, just like you said, Ronaldinho, the things he did with the ball, the old or the real R9 Ronaldo from Brazil.
Oh yeah, R9.
And if you ever saw him run with the ball, even though he's from Brazil and he used to destroy the Italians when he used to run with the ball. And then you have Baggio, but he can't take a PK to save his life. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'm always going to go with Pelé and Maradona just because I think they were beyond their time at the time. The things that they would do with a ball,
sure.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I can say this too. Like, I don't know if I don't know why this was my favorite player. I don't know why. Excuse my language. He's an asshole of a person, and he's a really crappy person, which I don't know, but like what you see off of social media, right? Is whatever. But what's who that again? Ibrahimovic. See, yeah, that's my favorite. I don't know why, but like I think it's from young age, right? Like playing FIFA and getting into like I loved how physical and stuff. And then when I really started watching soccer, probably like 08, somewhere in there, was kind of like right in his prime, right? Like 08, 12, 16 was right in that prime of his, and he was just aggressive, but I loved how he played, and I know obviously it sucked watching him in 14, I think, whenever him and America played. And like, that was a hard one to watch, but ideally, like, Zlatan's my guy. I loved him.
Man, I agree.
He's just a crap. From what I see, don't know him. Zlatan, if you ever watch this thing, I love you. If you want to come on this podcast, come on. But so you might be a great person, but what I see is, that guy. But yeah, Zlatan's just, I loved watching him.
But you know what's amazing? You know what's amazing about him? I'm so glad you brought him up. For his stature, how big he is, the things he can do, because he's also with the martial arts and he keeps his body. He's absolutely phenomenal. A lot of these guys like Messi's are so short, they'll lower to the ground, the things they can do with the ball. For him to be as big as he is, to do the things he could do, I'm with you, man. Like, I love his attitude. I adore that, man. I adore it, man. Even he said, remember Cannavaro that played for the Italian national team, the defender? They said, who was the hardest defender you played against? And he said, Cannavaro. He said, because Cannavaro was like 5'6". He said, because every time I would jump up, Cannavaro was right here underneath my neck.
Yeah.
So, it's respect from a guy who's like, hey, man, I small guys bullied me too. And I love Ibrahimovic, man. You'll never hear me say anything bad about him. I love him.
Yeah, I mean, he's just aggressive, man. I loved his fighter mentality and stuff. He's cool to watch. I loved watching how feisty he was. So then, like, I guess who's the best American to ever play?
Wow, best American. I mean, I think just this new generation so much. The old generation, you got to give them props to. In California, I was lucky enough to be able to sit down and talk with a lot of these guys like the Donovans and them. They're actually based in Southern California. But Pulisic is just right now. He's tearing it up, man. It's amazing what he's doing, and people wrote him off after a while, and his pace. And I think we got a bright generation, man, with Weah and all these guys, man. They're days, and we just have to hopefully Pochettino. They're playing tonight at 8:00. Hopefully Pochettino instills something in them that we can bring it home.
Yep. And big shout out to Mr. Howard for having the best goalkeeping experience, or best goalkeeping game ever in the 2016, or was it 2016 World Cup, maybe even 2012, I don't remember, but best keeper that we've had historically ever. So
I love to. Yeah, I got to see Timmy when I was at Duke. The USMNT soccer up here in Raleigh training. And they called our goalkeeping coach to see if he would come and sit in on a session because a goalkeeper got sick. And Timmy Howard was there, and that's when they had Deuce and all those guys. So we got to watch them train, man. Just different level.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I will say my favorite keeper of all time, though, is Ochoa from Mexico. I loved Ochoa. I don't know if it was the flow of his hair or just how he combated himself, but him, that Chicharito, like that whole Mexican team. Granted, my roommate in college, he was he was a soccer player at school, but he was a big Mexico fan, and he talked me into liking a lot of people, and I pretty much watched every Mexican game for probably 2 years. Yeah, Ochoa was just that guy. So I don't know what it was, but Ochoa was my favorite keeper.
That
At least
rivalry, man. U.S. Mexico back in those days was a rivalry, man.
it was. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to watch, and it's definitely it's cool to watch, like my favorite La Liga team is Atletico Madrid. I love, I've always liked them, and then whenever we won La Liga somehow, some way with when we signed Griezmann, and yeah, it was a fun time for me to watch. So yeah, I mean, man, soccer. I have appreciation for soccer, even though I might not seem like that guy, but yeah, soccer's my thing for sure.
That's
I play
awesome,
FIFA
man.
every year.
Man, if you're ever in North Carolina, man, come look me up for sure.
I will. But Coach, I really appreciate you jumping on. This was a great episode. Definitely was really, really fun. So I appreciate you jumping on. But with that being said, guys, thank you guys for listening. Peace.